What up, everyone? This is the Twice Over Film Club, and I'm your host, Faraz. Today we're discussing Elena, a Russian language film from 2011. Hopefully you've got your watch in because this episode does contain spoilers. Check out thetwiceover.com to see how we rated this film. If you're looking for a film with great aesthetics and strong thematic elements, this film is as high as an 85. But if you're only concerned with the story, you might feel it's a bit more average. While you're there, see all the other movies we've reviewed on our podcast, and make sure you follow us at The Twice Over on all the socials to stay current with our watch list. Alright, it's myself, Fahad, and Yusuf.
What do you guys think about the performances? Is it hard to judge because it's your first experience with Russian movies? I guess because Elena, the main character, Elena, the actress's name, she won an award apparently, right? So,
Multiple,
what do you guys think overall about the acting?
Yeah, again, I'm going to struggle to say these names, but Nadija Markina, I'll go with that, plays Elena. And so, I mean, she's kind of our totem the entire movie, essentially, right? There's very few shots that she's not in. She's kind of the constant throughout this entire thing. I thought she was really good. I honestly ended up feeling about average about the acting overall. I think that's because maybe I didn't like some of the supporting acting, and I didn't like the way that the plot kind of I didn't like the acting that she was forced to do by virtue of the plot, I guess. It seemed a little bit disingenuous at times. But like if we're talking about, for example, after you've murdered your husband, like how do you feel and how quickly do you get to that decision and then move on from that decision? Did you feel this movie a little bit disjointed in that fashion?
Yeah. So okay. As far as the narrative goes. Right, Fahad, you really liked it at 90. I give it a 55, actually. Yusuf, what did you give the narrative?
Narrative, I'm at a 60. So
okay, so me and Yusuf probably are seeing eye to eye here, and it's probably because of that scene right there, or that decision, right, for the story to progress in a way where she decides pretty abruptly that, hey, I'm going to murder my husband. That's how I'm going to save Sasha's potential draft to the military. But, like, how sudden it was... It just ruined the story for me because after that, all I could think about, like, wait, why did she?
Because you felt throughout the beginning of the movie that she was an upstanding person, right?
Right.
Someone who's morally grounded and everything else. So are we finally seeing her for what she is? Was she originally just like, somewhat of a parasite? Was she just in it for the money? With this marriage, I
thought about that for a second, but I didn't feel ready to accept that either because the scene that follows right after, right, for us is like how many ever minutes of her kind of dealing and coping with what she just did, and she's like clearly having basically a panic attack afterwards. She's like, she doesn't know how to get rid of the notes about the will, and she's kind of like fumbling with that, and it basically it clearly had an impact on her, and it's not like only someone who's like a seasoned killer can make that decision and act on it so quickly. But she clearly wasn't that based on her reaction. So like I did want to believe that like, she really is just kind of a regular person. She's a motherly, figure who, found herself in kind of a precarious situation. So then it did bother me because that decision just seemed totally out of the character as far as what else I could read from the movie. So, I'm getting away from the acting part of this, but it's because that really just impacted my ability to even assess the acting. She probably did a pretty good job acting out all of that, all of that emotion and the panic and everything, but it just felt out of place.
What was your score overall for acting, Yusuf?
I was at a 70. So, I mean, I thought she did pretty well, but I guess this is a discussion. Maybe I shouldn't hammer down on the acting for decisions that were clearly made by the director, right? And so
for the story, right?
Right, exactly. So, I mean, I'm at average, but I thought she herself was probably above average. The other side characters, maybe not as much, but, she was really like a solid, constant figure to kind of carry you through the story, I thought.
Yeah, she was definitely the most relatable person in this movie.
100%.
I thought that I see the trouble that you're having, right? Seeing her for the murderer that she is, and then for her actions the rest of the movie. Does that more so then speak more so about like the desperateness of a situation she was in, that she was forced to that she considered the murder, right?
I don't think the situation she was in was that desperate.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that desperate either. Do you think the story should have made her grandson's story a little bit more dire in order to justify, her actions? I thought that.
Yeah, and so I think they kind of try to do that actually. So when she does get the money already, and we see the lights go out in the building, and Sasha leaves like with his boys to like go fight another gang or something.
Yeah, please.
So they kind of try to force that in. Yeah, I mean, my perspective was that they're trying to force us to like understand this is the world he's in. Like he needs to get out, right? Or else he's gonna be stuck in this world where he might not survive. Because I mean, obviously, poverty is poverty, right? So I don't know. Again, that scene was very random. It was sudden. It just happened. It was like a plot device. It just didn't feel that great. Like that. I didn't like take anything away from the acting here or anything like that. My score for narrative speaks for itself, right? If I gave it a 55, I just thought like those things in the story kind of took me out.
Yeah, can we break down that shot? Because I thought they put a lot of emphasis on that shot in a couple of ways. And like I'll tell you basically what I noticed is that most of the movie, they're pretty still shots that we're looking through. That shot was, when Sasha is leaving his house, following his friends out into the forest. That was clearly on handheld. So like there's kind of a change in perspective there. It's a very rocky shot. It's like up and down, bouncing all over the place.
It's very chaotic, right?
Yes.
And I think that's what the camera work tries to bring into it.
100%.
Like the chaos of it, the animalistic energy, right?
Right. And so, I didn't want to just like dismiss this scene as like, oh, they're just trying to show us a quick thing. I mean, it was very carefully put in there, and it's put in very close to the end of the movie as well. So it's like one of those things that kind of lingers with you. What else were they trying to say there? And to be honest, I was even confused about who was beating him up. Like, I was like, at first I thought he was like approaching like a bunch of homeless people, and they were just being like horrible children. You know what I mean? And then, yeah, it was clear that there was like other teenagers there or whatever. So, and it looks like he just kind of gets beat up, and he's left on the ground. And then the camera goes back to like a still shot, just looking down that little like narrow passageway along the trees, right? And, the lights are kind of starting to flicker on because it's hitting dusk. But he's just lying there still motionless for quite a while, and then he kind of rolls over at the end.
Do you think they should have ended the movie there with him lying on the tracks?
It would have
kind of
not
implying that he died.
It wouldn't have been a bad shot, right? It's like you could take so many meanings out of that, where it's like, okay, all your problems are solved, but you can only take a horse. You can only bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it. Is that like he gets in his own way in the end, no matter what everyone is trying to do to kind of basically
alleviate his situation, right?
Yeah,
and it would be
and
extremely tragic.
Curate his life, right?
Yeah,
they're not able to kind of step in, but they don't leave us on that shot. So like, I got very kind of scatterbrained trying to break down what we're trying to. What should I glean from that shot, basically?
I think you're right to glean that his life isn't going to be overall changed. It's not going to be changed for the better, right? Even though all this money is being injected into his life, I don't see him succeeding in his future endeavors. He's just going to end up like his father. And the movie tries to hammer that home with the dialogue between Katya and her father, Vladimir, in the hospital. It's like the idea that the kids are the rotten seeds of their parents, and nothing ever changes.
Yeah, I guess I like that. Nobody can solve your problems, right? Because it seems like the mother is constantly trying to solve. Elena is trying to solve Sergei's problems, her son, and Sergei, through his mother, is trying to solve Sasha's problems. And now, great, they got him into university because they have the money, and he doesn't have to go to the military. Does that mean he's going to be some successful businessman? Absolutely not, right?
Yeah.
So basically, nobody can solve your problems, and not even money can solve your problems, right? Not bad. I think I like that breakdown of it. I was a little bit confused in the moment, but kind of stepping back and thinking it through, I like what they're trying to show us there.
I would have liked a more tragic ending.
You want it to be more dark?
Yeah.
Were you waiting for something to happen? Because they do kind of make things a little
ominous.
Ominous, yeah, because right, she's on the train with the money, and the train hits a horse and kills it. When they're at the apartment, the lights go out, and she freaks out, like as if something is gonna happen. Right? She's she's obviously has the burden of guilt on her at this point. So I was anticipating, something to happen.
Yeah, same.
Maybe something tragic.
And the way she's tightly holding on to the money, like it's her life, right?
Yeah. But at the end, right, they're all happily in this nice new, well, not new for Elena, but for the family. They're at the condo. They're already making future plans, like, hey, we're going to build a wall here, and then Sasha can have his own room. It was a strange ending for me. And then we do see Sasha staring down at a bunch of kids playing soccer. I was trying to figure out, what are they trying? What is it symbolizing here?
So Sasha in that scene, he spits off of the balcony, similar to the way he was doing in his former in the slums, right? And so I think it's just showing that nothing's changed really.
So, well, I thought maybe it was like, oh, he's not gonna fit in with those kids there that he's watching. Like he's just he's different from them. He's separate from them, even if he's in the same neighborhood.
It was just a very interesting sequence to end on. So Faraz, you pointed out the first thing that bothered me, or not bothered me, but I was like, wait, am I supposed to be getting something? And I'm not sure, which was that police horse or whatever it was kind of lying on the side of the railway, and everyone's kind of glancing back at it. And then the power goes out. Then we have, Sasha and his friends getting, beat up in the forest. And then once they get into their home, right? Or, it was Vladimir's home that they've now kind of taken over. There's also this like kind of strange shot of the new baby, I guess, right? Laying on the bed, and just like it's like an isolated shot, just kind of framed right around the baby. Again, laying motionless, and you can see that the baby is breathing, obviously, is like sleeping. But like, what was that about too? So that's kind of the progression of those like odd scenes. I was like, maybe I'm really not catching something here.
I wasn't sure either. So my first thought was, all right, now Sasha's younger brother, the baby, is gonna grow up spoiled and rich, knowing only this kind of, and still end up like Katya or something. Yeah. That's the only thing I kind of gleaned from it, because
so when I saw that scene, my mind jumped back to that conversation between Vladimir and Elena, where they're talking about Sergei's mistake, the first kid, right? And he talks about, oh, there was a second mistake, and she like dismisses it, and now this is the third mistake. I think that's what the director just wants.
Wait, that's not
the
third kid. She's still pregnant with the third one.
Oh yeah.
Right. So that's the younger brother, and then she's pregnant with the third, right?
Yeah, but like it also shows like how like Elena wants to defend them, like, hey, the first one was just a mistake, they had him when he was really young, but like it's the same, I guess, mistake now 3 times. I think one thing that we should really be taking away from this movie is, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure, like, as a third party, we're looking at Katya's situation with her father, and then Sergei's situation with his mother. And we can clearly understand both sides, right? When Vladimir says, hey, Sergei should be taking care of his own son. And then at the same time, when Elena is saying, like, hey, you do all this for your daughter despite her not taking advantage of any of it. Like, why can't you help out my kids? So, like, I see both sides here, but how did you guys see it?
I didn't see it any further than that, right?
I mean, I guess the point is, right, that depending on your situation, like what side is going to be more reasonable to you? Because for Elena, it's unreasonable that Vladimir continues to support Katya the way he does. And for Vladimir, it's unreasonable for Elena to expect him to support Sergei and his family. But from our perspective, both are kind of right in some way.
I mean, I think you're speaking to what I thought was kind of one of the larger motifs that we were watching, which is kind of like duty, right? So, there's duties that you have in the sense of like a responsibility to others, and a responsibility for your own matters, right? And so for Elena, it's like, I absolutely do not have a choice. He's my son, and this is my grandson, and I need to do what I can, and no one else can tell me how to deal with them, right? She kind of admonishes Vladimir in like one of the very earliest conversation that we see them have at the breakfast table, for kind of meddling in terms of, why do you have to go over there to drop off groceries and money? Why can't he come drag himself over here and pick it up himself? So there's like that. And then on the other side of the table is Vladimir, who's now being asked to, to show a sense of responsibility to someone outside of, his own. And he obviously does not see that it's his duty. It's not his responsibility. So there's kind of a divide there in terms of, what you're truly what should be asked of you, I guess, right? Because you would argue that, oh, he has money and it's his wife, he should be willing to help out, but they kind of draw these hard lines in terms of what they're responsible for, right?
Yeah, because he even says, like, hey, if it was his health that was in question right now, you would see the money on the table right away. But like when it comes to his education, he doesn't see it the same way, and Elena tries to explain, like, hey, it's just as important, but the line's drawn for him,
right? And because he even says, like, oh, this would be a good lesson for Sergei. So essentially, Sasha being sent off to the army is a good lesson for his father, that he needs to figure out how to deal with his own stuff, right? Like, and that's kind of the world that he sees and how he thinks things should be dealt with. So I thought that was interesting. And then there's also kind of this whole idea of similar to the duty that you have to people, like, also, like, whether you're like what duties you have, like, unto yourself, or what is your purpose, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because he looks at his daughter, and the fact that, how many times is the fact that she doesn't have any children, so Vladimir does not have any grandchildren, how many times does that come up? It comes up several times with Elena, and then also in the hospital directly to Katya, and he views it as, like, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. At the same time, he's kind of scolding Sergei for having children, right, and doing it without being able to take care of them. So I thought that was kind of an interesting duality as well.
Definitely, because considering Katya is probably totally incapable of raising children without the help of her father
or her partner, right?
Or her partner, whoever. Yeah, but like in terms of financial help, clearly she's reliant upon her father.
I think Vladimir, he wants Katya to start her own family because he thinks it will give her purpose, right, to have kids.
Yeah, that's kind of what he implies, that you would have a...
Yeah, because he sees it with Elena and how dutiful she is towards not only her own children but her grandchildren. The amount of sacrifices she's willing to go through just to ensure their welfare. And then Katya comes back with that whole exchange in the hospital was great, right? Where they're talking about meaning in life and
yeah,
that was a good exchange. The dialogue was like very clever, like about purpose, right? About again, like what Yusuf was saying, like the duties that each of them have. And you can kind of get the sense that, Katya does love her dad.
Oh yeah,
it's just
by the end of it, they're like they've like bonded in their
nihilism.
He's
laughing. He's like
right?
laughing at everything, right? They're enjoying each other's company at the very end.
Yeah, it's interesting because that seems to not be enough for him in a sense, because, like, they actually get along, right? On the other hand, Elena and Sergei, I would argue they don't really like each other that much, right? But there's this familial bond between them, and nothing else needs to be said about that, right? It's just like, that's all there is. He's my son, she's my mother, and so the two very different relationships. This just occurred to me now, but it's almost as though Vladimir is a little bit jealous of the sacrifices that Elena has made. So the fact that it seems a little nonsensical that you'd be jealous of someone else's sacrifices, right? But the sacrifices do give her purpose, like you said, right? And Vladimir doesn't really have that. He harps on that a couple times, where he's like, there's only two people in the world for me, and it's Elena, who ends up murdering him, and Katya, right? That's all he has, and that's all there will be for him.
He's looking over to the other side, and he's like looking at how other people live towards the end of his own life, right? Maybe he has some final regrets on how he's lived his life, kind of like in a cold way, where he's just chased money in his career.
He has that realization when he's like, I need to write a will, and like you just said, there's only two people in his life that he has to like account for.
And he doesn't love Elena, right? And Elena doesn't love him. That's what I took away from it. Did you guys feel any different?
I thought there was definitely some love there.
So it was weird at the very beginning, the first scene or two. I thought it was maybe like her dad or something,
because of their
they don't
living
sleep,
situation
they don't sleep in the same
rooms.
room.
Yeah, separate rooms.
Yeah, exactly. And then when she, I think when they initially mentioned like, hey, this is, you don't talk about your daughter that way. And I'm like, oh, okay, they're definitely a couple with like previous marriages and children. I do think there is love between them, but it's almost like platonic in a way. I mean, we do see them, like they do have one intimate moment, but there's nothing, I guess it's not your standard
It's definitely
version
yeah, it's
of
definitely
love.
not your standard relationship, but it's Vladimir, and I don't know if he's ever been more intimate than anyone else, right? He's got this estranged relationship with his own daughter. His first wife's left him. We don't see her at all. So maybe this is as much as far as he can go with, like, you know, sharing his life with someone else.
I like how you said that. Like, it's Vladimir. Like, it's Vlad. You know how Vlad is. Like,
yeah.
I mean, you're right though. Like that's kind of just that's all we see that he's capable of necessarily. I do want to make the argument that they're absolutely not in love. So let me lay out a couple of things that I noticed, just kind of threads that I was trying to tie together.
I mean, one that she murders.
Yeah, one, she murders him. That is correct. That's a big one. Shoot, I didn't even have that on my list. Let me just adjust real quick. Okay.
So you got 4. All right.
Yeah, so we got a few more now. So yeah, obviously she murders him. But you know, one thing that I noticed right from the very beginning of the movie, aesthetically, in terms of the sound, I thought they were doing a lot of careful, you know, movements with the sound leveling and everything. Did you guys notice that, like, anytime they were in the house, there's like an extremely like hollow feeling to all of the sound. It's like really quiet,
echoey.
Yeah, it's echoey. There's like sharp noises. I felt like I had like my ear to the floor in those scenes, and it's like every single noise like resonates a little bit, right? Especially like in that early scene, she's in the kitchen preparing breakfast or whatever. She's drawing the shades, all of that. Like, it was just like all the noises were very jarring. And then eventually she leaves the house. She goes out into the street. There's so much more bustle. The orchestral music that was used frequently, which I really liked, starts to kind of play over. You get like a real contrast with the interior. It's almost like there's a warmth and there's a busyness once she's outside the house. Inside, it felt very, cold and functional almost, and I thought that was representative of their relationship, right? They, like you said, they sleep in different rooms. There's often asks about, you know, what do you need to do? What do you need to get done? What do you need from me? Is it my responsibility to do X, Y, and Z? And I felt like that was kind of the baseline for their relationship. When we see that in contrast with what goes on in Sergei's home, it's like they're always yelling at each other. They don't even like each other, but they're family at the end of the day. It's like there's a warmth there with like the way that they hate each other, with like the arguments that they have. You know what I mean? It felt a lot more regular to me in a way. So yeah, I think I felt like they were changing the sound leveling in those different scenes to kind of make sure that you felt how hollow it was inside that house. So that was one thing that I certainly noticed off the bat.
I would say one thing to add to that, as far as the rich Vladimir's house, the TV was always so loud.
Oh my God, yeah.
They were blasting it. And then, you have Elena, who's generally watching like talk shows or something, and Vladimir's watching his soccer games.
So my theory on that is that Elena was watching these talk shows where the whole point was to get at some moral, I guess, I don't know. It's more
I saw it as like self-improvement stuff, right? Like self-improvement, like dieting, exercising, things like that.
Yeah, to ensure that the general public has a good foundation of morals, right? And then Vladimir was just watching just stuff to indulge himself, right? Sports or some other stuff that was just like for pleasure. But yeah, Yusuf, completely agreed on your observation about how cold their house was, and it speaks to kind of like how, I guess maybe the director was trying to draw a contrast between the two households. Like, one's very cramped, and so you hear a lot. You're inundated with more noise.
Yeah,
and then in a larger house, every little sound would sound larger.
Mm-hmm. Right, because of how empty it is in a way. Yeah, I think that's right. And then like there's also, did you guys notice there's these little scenes that I was like trying to place, and there's a whole thing before he has the heart attack when he goes to the gym, right? He's on the treadmill and he's kind of like eyeing this much younger woman, and then And then he kind of, she notices him. He smiles at her. She walks past him when he's at the water fountain. And then is she also the lifeguard that ends up kind of pulling him out of the water?
No,
it's different.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in any case, for some reason, that just I was like, what are they trying to tell us? And the only thing I could get away from it was that, basically his eyes wander, right? He's not the most faithful person, and it's not that he means anything by it or he has any intention, but it's just that he's not really in love with Elena or anything like that. It's just that she is his wife, and so basically my last point, of course, with the disclaimer that the most important red flag is that she murders him. But the third thing was that when he's talking about writing his will, right before she does murder him, he says so robotically, kind of, that of course you two are the only people in my life. Everything will be going to my daughter, and you will be getting pre-apportioned payments month by month that will be enough and sufficient for your needs. And it's like, okay, he's just, that is a that's a line on his expenses that he has to check off. You know what I mean? That's how it felt to me when he said that. And I really do think Elena, kind of in her head, she takes it the same way, because that is what sets her mind to take things into her own hands.
But in that scene, that particular thing about her receiving the annuity payments or whatever, that didn't disappoint her. I think that's all she was expecting.
Because her next question really is it's not even about this, but what about Sasha?
Yeah.
And that's what really, I think, triggers her,
and then
right?
Rewind 30 seconds, and Vladimir's talking about how he's been postponing this conversation. So he obviously feels like he owes her more, right? So I guess he feels that sense of duty to her, but he doesn't act on it. What do you think, Yusuf?
Yeah, at least he knows that it's kind of a grimy move to a degree, right? Whether he feels it, he should give her more or not, he knows that this isn't going to go down perfectly, and so he realizes the prickly situation and kind of puts it off. Yeah, I could see that. But anyways, I thought there's little cues that they have more of a functional relationship than they do kind of a really personal relationship. And then I thought it was a nice, ironic little detail that, of course we get that, there's one moment of intimacy at the beginning of the movie that we see, right? And then she uses the Viagra basically to overdose him after or I guess not overdose, well, in whatever case, since he has a weak heart, he shouldn't be taking that, and he takes way too much because she adds it to his regular medicine, and then basically tells the coroner that he wanted to, he wanted to get intimate, and he took it, and he's like, what the hell's wrong with you guys? You're like little children. And so...
Yeah, that was a little bit of good comedy, right?
Right. So, I mean, oddly enough, the whole fact that they were intimate, that's kind of what gets twisted into, into being used as a tool for his murder.
Yeah. A little bit of irony there.
Yeah, I'm okay with accepting that maybe they're in a loveless marriage, but like you said, a functional one.
Yeah, they're okay with it, right? They're just...
Yeah, there's still benefit, mutual benefit.
Yeah, they knew what it was, and it is exactly what they expected it to be. But obviously, that leaves very little. As we're talking about duties, there's very little duty left from one of them to the other. For Vladimir, he just doesn't feel that he owes her much in terms of support beyond a certain amount, and obviously, she feels that her interest should supersede his, even if it means his life.
Well, it also just very simply shows why he has no connection to, the people that Elena loves, such as her son and her grandson, and also why Elena has no sympathy or empathy towards Katya and her situation with her father.
Right.
They're totally detached from that because, like we said, their relationship is far too functional and not personal.
And then, oddly enough, Katya doesn't really, at least we don't see her put up much of a fight about what happened and how it happened, right? The coroner kind of writes his report, and he just accepts Elena's word for it. We do have the one shot in the attorney's office, kind of parsing out the estate after his death, right? After Vladimir's death. So we do get a shot where they're kind of sitting next to each other and going through things. And Katya mentions that, I think there's a lot of cash that he used to keep in the house. And Elena says, no, I checked, it's not there. And Katya just says, yeah, right, of course. Very, very dismissive, as in okay, if you say so, but I knew you were going to say that. But we don't see anything in terms of consequences or any suspicion on Elena beyond that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did Katya in that situation suspect that Elena had already taken it, or like it was her? Like, I don't know, because her reaction is almost a sarcastic, of course.
Yeah, but
of course
at that point,
that.
she's already getting a huge estate, so she doesn't care.
She didn't care.
But wouldn't she care if she thought that there was some funny business? I mean, beyond the money itself, just would that signal to her that, maybe this wasn't a simple accident? And she does say earlier when Katya and Elena meet in the coffee shop before Katya goes to visit Vladimir in the hospital, she says something about like, okay, look, you're playing a great job. I mean, you're doing a great job playing the dutiful wife. We get it. Like, she kind of says like, you're putting on the act. We see it, and it's good. It's solid. But she certainly points out that it's just a facade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she suspects that it's not genuine, and I guess as us as an audience, we kind of agree with her, don't we?
But yes, I should add that to my list after the murder. Also, Katya doesn't think they have any love in their marriage as well.
Yeah, I don't know if Katya necessarily resents Elena, right? And my whole thing about that is because Elena is like the only person in her dad's life. Otherwise, it's just them two, right? And she doesn't necessarily want to. She doesn't want a relationship with her father, so why
beyond what
her?
It is already?
Yeah.
I kind of wish there was a little more behind Katya and her story. I mean, they imply a bunch of stuff and infer a bunch of stuff, but this is not there. But whatever, I didn't have too much of a problem with it. It did function pretty well within the rest of the story.
And I think I did appreciate kind of how streamlined the story was. There's a lot where they kind of, there's one-off, remarks that tell you something about some of those side characters and their backstories, but they don't really spend time walking you through it or anything. So, I mean, you kind of get the same with Sergey and kind of how he's kind of a deadbeat dad, essentially, right? He doesn't, he's not able to hold a job. And in fact, he doesn't seem like he's even trying to get a job. He's pretty much reliant on Tanya, his wife.
He's a sloth. He's constantly looking in the fridge for a beer.
Yeah,
just, like,
I loved how Tanya says like go get your son, talk to him, and so he goes to get his son. He's playing video games and he's like, give me the controller, like, and then they're just sitting there together playing. And he's like, I'm talking to my son, leave me alone. So yeah, it's
I think they rely on Elena's pension, right? Because technically Elena doesn't need the pension because she's living with Vladimir. It's like they pretty much are living off of Elena's pension, and he shows no motivation to go out and like change his life.
No remorse for his actions, right?
Yeah, this is where we totally understand why Vladimir doesn't want to just feed into it. At the same time, right? He does it no matter he doesn't hold anything back though for Katya, despite her similar persona. I mean, maybe she's not a sloth, but she's not, I guess she's not responsible in other ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Vladimir just feels that, well, Katya is my responsibility, so I have to do it. Don't bring that into this. The question of me giving money to someone who is not my family, which he pretty much says specifically, right? He says, it's somebody who's not part of my life.
Strangers.
So, that he needs a justification for. But I really thought they did an efficient job of like showing us those dynamics without giving us like, without wasting time on those characters and, walking through what they've been through and what type of people they are. You kind of get the picture really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Yusuf, do you mind telling me what your aesthetic score was?
Yes, my aesthetic score was an 85.
Nice.
Okay, so you're lower than both me and Fahad, but not by much. I give it a 95, Fahad the 90. We kind of mentioned the camera work in here. I mean, I really appreciated how smooth and soft and slow it was. Like in the house especially, the camera work is...
It's like, impeccable, right? You get
it's our eyes,
a beautiful
right?
sense of space, especially in the rich flat.
The way it just moves, like it would move as your head would move if you're trying to like look around a corner, if you're like when you're moving towards something, it's not just zooming in, it's slowly moving towards it. I just thought the camera work was great. And then Fahad, you mentioned the score. You really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah.
I didn't notice it much, but the times I did notice it, I did appreciate it quite a bit. It was mainly during like travel scenes or like when someone's in the car, someone's outside, they're going one place to another place. That's like the only real time I noticed the music.
Yeah, well, I noticed they never used it inside of Vladimir and Elena's house. They kind of left the silence there to kind of speak for itself there.
Yeah.
Good observation.
but yeah, I mean, I actually I totally agree with like the way that those shots of the interior kind of, they're so still, and then they kind of like slowly just wade, closer and closer as they're, focusing in on something. I really liked that, and they used like a lot of those still shots to open. It's like, I want to say like 6 or 7 back to back, just still shots of different things. We actually start with like outside the window, kind of in the middle of the trees, right, where like there's like no movement other than 1 or 2 birds that are kind of moving about, and then we go inside and we get several just absolutely still shots of different locations within the house before we even see any movement, which is, we finally get a shot of Elena kind of waking up in bed. But I thought those were really elegant scenes, and they did a really good job of like kind of establishing the setting, making sure you understood that environment and what they were trying to convey with it. So, and then, like I said, like on top of that, with the aesthetics of kind of how they use the sound to give you like a quality to the emptiness of that house, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now I'm thinking back. I feel like in Sergei's house, I believe the camera does not move.
There's no movement.
I guess it's
There's
really
no
small.
possibility for movement, right? There's no possibility for tracking within that cramped interior.
There's nowhere to go, right?
So yeah.
I think it might pan from room to room, but that's probably about
it. Yeah. So I guess it just gives you another sense of like how much space there is in Vladimir's house, that it kind of has to slowly make its way towards room to room. Whereas in Sergei's, it's just, hey, let's just turn our head this way, and there you are.
Yeah.
And interestingly, they, like I said, they open on that shot like through the trees, kind of looking at an angle through a window into the house, although you can't really see much because of the glare. But they end on that exact same shot. And this time around, the house is populated. At the opening shot, it's totally empty. Nobody's there. There's no movement. At the end, it's, an entire family sitting around the TV. Sasha is out on the balcony. Like it's an occupied household, right? And I don't know if that's trying to say something about like kind of, there's some warmth in that house finally. I don't know, but
maybe.
I just did notice that's like the big difference, right? There's suddenly all this movement and bustle inside the house, which we didn't start out with.
So the only other thing I'd add to that is that the opening scene was a sunrise shot, and then the end looks to be dusk, or you can't really tell because it's dark.
Sunset.
So you're assuming like end of the day kind of scene.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is this, right? From the death of Vladimir, there's life in the house.
Yeah.
True. That's very true. Did you guys take anything else away thematically?
I think we've discussed the major themes already. Yusuf, do you want to give me your scores for writing and themes just so I can like round it out and see what we...
Writing is an 80 and themes is an 80.
So we're actually very close generally. I think only Fahad really loved the narrative, and like the story arc didn't bother him how sudden it was. But me and Yusuf definitely had an issue with it. So like, for me it's a 78, for Yusuf it's a 72, for Fahad it's an 87.
Yeah.
It's a pretty solid movie. Fahad, why don't you end it with this? What would you tell a viewer to be prepared for before watching a movie like this? I don't think this is the kind of movie that I could convince many people to watch.
Yeah, I'd just say just be in a more contemplative headspace before you put on this movie. Don't expect any action scenes or anything like too dramatic. Yeah, and just be dialed into just observing things that are being shown, and just draw meaning from those things. Nothing's going to be spoon-fed in this movie.
Yeah, I think this movie is pretty open to interpretation. I would say I would suggest this movie to somebody who is going to appreciate the aesthetics of it, who's going to appreciate the shot framing, the sound, and
the set design as well.
Yeah, the set design, and hand in hand with those things, the themes, because I really think that those aesthetics were totally geared towards conveying what they wanted to convey without saying it. So I think if you're interested in those two things, this movie's really well dialed into that. And the narrative is, I will say, I wasn't bored. I can't imagine someone watching this movie and then complaining that the story was too bland. It certainly isn't that, but maybe also not the highlight for me. But it lands somewhere in the middle there for that. So I think if you're, like you said, if you're in a contemplative mood and if you have an appreciation for the mechanics of the movie with the camera and the sound, I think this movie's great for that.
Yeah, I think no doubt our aesthetics is our highest category, and themes comes right after. So I agree with what you said.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and sharing it with a friend. Want to see what your tally is? Check out thetwiceover.com. All the movies we've done are listed there, as well as what we're watching for the current week. Follow us at The Twice Over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where you can leave us any suggestions, feedback, or comments. And if you're about it, you can also support us on Patreon. The music you hear on this podcast is from Amerigo Gazaway. You can find his work on Bandcamp and Spotify.